Hi, welcome back to Rock Talk. It took a while, but here it finally is. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a rocket that sets itself on fire and yeeted the fastest man-made object into the solar system. The mighty Delta IV rocket. The Delta IV is launched by United Launch Alliance, or ULA. The rocket was developed by Boeing Space and Defense and carried over to ULA when Lockheed Martin and Boeing joined forces. The rocket launches from Slick 38B in Cape Canaveral or Slick 6 in Vandenberg. Delta IV is a liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen rocket. It had its first flight on the 20th of November 2002 and is still in operation today as a Delta IV Heavy, with all other variants being retired. The retirement of the medium versions was announced by ULA in 2015, and with the Atlas V taking over in the short term and the Vulcan in the longer term. The Delta IV Heavy is expected to retire in 2024. A few notable payloads are Orion capsule, the Sparker solar probe, military communications, weather, and numerous spy satellites. The rocket comes in 5 configurations: 1 medium variant, 3 medium plus variants, and 1 heavy variant. The first stage of all the 5 variants is the same. The first stage is therefore called the Common Booster Core, or CBC. This is not to be confused with the CCB, or Common Core Booster, of the Atlas V, the other ULA rocket. The Delta IV was developed with the Evolved Expendable Launch Vehicles program requirements in mind for the US Air Force. The rocket reused the second stage from the Delta III, but replaced the Carolox lower stage by a Hydrolox one. In the beginning, a small version of the rocket was considered by replacing the Delta cryogenic upper stage with the Delta II second stage and fairing. This version would have been the Delta Small. This eventually was dropped. Boeing originally intended to use the rocket on the commercial market, but in 2003 it pulled the Delta from the market, citing low demand and high costs. It sought to bring the Delta back to the commercial market in 2005, but as we all know, this didn't really work. Besides the first launch carrying Eutelsat 5W, all launches have been paid for by the US government. Besides this, the rocket has an incredible reliability record of 97.5%, with the only failure being partial due to the booster shutting down early on the first Delta IV Heavy flight. The Delta IV Medium was retired pretty quickly. It flew its third and last flight in 2006. The Medium Plus 4.2 flew 15 times with its last flight in 2019. The Medium Plus 5.4 also flew 3 times and took off for the final time in 2018. The Medium Plus 5.4 flew 8 times with the last flight in 2019. The Heavy has flown 11 times to date and still has 5 more flights scheduled. Now we'll look at the rocket itself. The optional GEM 60 boosters are 13.2 meters tall and 1.5 meters in diameter. They weigh 33.6 metric tons and provided a peak thrust of 826.6 kilonewtons. They burned for 91 seconds. The first stage, or CBC, is 40.8 meters high and 5 meters wide. Fully fueled, the stage weighs 222.4 metric tons. It operates for 245 seconds in the medium variants and 242 seconds as side boosters on the Delta IV Heavy, while the core operates for 328 seconds. The engine on the first stage is the RS-68 engine. In 2012, the engine was upgraded to the RS-68A, providing more thrust and slightly higher efficiency. 2,950 kilonewtons for the baseline version versus 1,300 kilonewtons for the upgraded version. In 2015, the baseline RS-68 was phased out. The RS-68 engine is the most powerful liquid hydrogen engine flown. The engine itself is derived from the RS-25, also known as the Space Shuttle main engine. The goal of the RS-68 was to make the engine cheaper by reducing the number of parts. This reduced the cost and increased flexibility since every CBC is the same at the start of the assembly and could be configured for 0, 2 or 4 boosters later in the assembly process. The Heavy doesn't benefit from this because the boosters and core are slightly different. The medium variant, however, suffered slightly lower performance due to the increased weight of the CBC. This was done by moving from staged combustion to gas generator cycle. This means that part of the fuel and oxidizer is burnt in a separate chamber and the exhaust powers the turbopumps instead of all the fuel being burnt with a bit of oxygen in the pre-burner, powering the turbopumps and then being injected with the rest of the oxygen into the combustion chamber like on the Space Shuttle main engine. The nozzle was also simplified by removing the regeneratively cooled nozzle and replacing it with a carbon ablative nozzle. The carbon ablative nozzle is also the reason the exhaust flame of the Delta IV is orange instead of clear. This modification reduced the number of parts by 80%. The downside of this all is that the efficiency of the engine was reduced. The hot gas of the pre-burner was not put back into the engine, but is instead used for roll control on the rocket. The turbo exhaust was offset from the engine so it could induce roll when slightly moved. A thing the RS-68 is famous for is the flare-up at engine ignition.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We have ignition of the RS-68A main engine, and we have liftoff!
In the RS-68, the hydrogen flows through the walls of the combustion chamber before it is injected into the combustion chamber. In the startup sequence of the RS-68, the hydrogen is injected first. For only a few seconds, the only thing flowing into the combustion chamber is hydrogen. Hydrogen is very light, so it escapes very quickly and begins to rise along the rocket. Then the oxygen gets injected into the engine and the engine ignites. The ignition of the engine also causes the rest of the hydrogen around the rocket to ignite, creating the fireball.
Hi, post-processing me here. Okay, that was slightly incorrect. The engine ignition doesn't cause the fireball. It is actually the sparklers that are ignited at T-15 that ignite the hydrogen around the rocket, causing the flare-up. So, yeah, slight correction.
The second stage is called the Delta Cryogenic Second Stage, or DCSS. The stage is an evolution from the Delta III second stage. It comes in a 4 or 5 meter variant, this referring to the diameter. The 4 meter variant is 12.2 meters tall and weighing 24.1 metric tons fully fueled. And the 5 meter variant is 13.7 meters tall, weighing 30.7 metric tons fully fueled. Both stages are powered by an RL-10B2, providing 110.1 kilonewtons of thrust.
I forgot to mention this, but the RL-10B2 has an extension nozzle, which is quite special. Not a lot of rockets have it, but it is too big to fit into the interstage, so they basically cut it in two, and then after stage separation, the nozzle screws into place.
The 4 meter variant has a burn time of 850 seconds and the 5 meter variant 1125 seconds. The Delta IV has 4 different fairings. The 4 meter wide fairing is 11.7 meters high, the 5 meter wide fairing is 14.3 meters high, and the 5 meter fairing for the Heavy is 19.1 meters high. The Heavy also has a possibility for a stretched fairing called the metallic fairing. The metallic fairing for the Delta IV is a 0.7 meter longer modified Titan IV fairing. If the rocket is designated as Delta IV Medium, the first stage consists of a CBC without boosters. The second stage is 4 meters in diameter, and so is the fairing. For the Medium Plus, it has 2 digits in its name. The first digit designates the width of the second stage and fairing. So it's either a 4 or a 5. The second digit tells us the number of solid rocket motors. This is a 2 for the 4 meter variant and a 2 or 4 for the 5 meter variant. The Heavy version has 3 CBCs strapped together as first stage and a 5 meter second stage. Some upgrades for the rocket were looked into, with some needing modifications to the pad. The most straightforward upgrade without any modifications to the pad were to add 2 more boosters to the 4.2 version, so you would get a 4.4 configuration. The core would have been the same as on the 5.4. The more exotic upgrades were to add more boosters to the first stage, increasing the number of boosters to 6 or 8. In my opinion, the most extreme upgrade looked like this: a Delta IV Heavy with 4 boosters at each CBC and an upgraded 6.5 meter wide fairing. Now, the rocket launch sequence rundown. I chose the sequence of the Delta IV Heavy because that's the only one we're going to see fly between now and 2024. I will highlight the events that are different from the Medium and the Medium Plus variants. The countdown is the same for all vehicles. The Delta IV had 2 big holds in the countdown, one before fueling and one at T-4 minutes before terminal count. If a problem comes up in the countdown, these holds are built in to solve any problems. Therefore, you will likely see 2 countdowns, L- and T-. L- is the time until T0 and T- is the time left in the countdown. If the countdown continues beyond the T-4 minute mark, it means that any problem in the last minutes will result in the countdown being reset to T-4 minutes and holding until resolved. The times are approximate and may differ slightly depending on the mission. The times for second stage ignition were taken from the user's manual posted on the ULA website. L-8 hours. The launch controllers are briefed on the weather prior to the mobile service tower being rolled back. If weather is go, the mobile tower is rolled back. L-5 hours and 30 minutes. The launch pad is evacuated and the roadblocks come into effect. L-5 hours. The launch area is to be verified clear of personnel. The weather briefing prior to fueling takes place. L-4 hours 33 minutes. The go-no-go poll for propellant loading takes place. T-4 hours and 50 minutes. The countdown clock is started, the inertial flight control assembly is activated, and the LH2 tank in the CBCs are chilled down in preparation for fueling. T-3 hours 55 minutes. The LH2 slowly starts filling the CBC's tank. T-3 hours 45 minutes. The CBC's hydrogen filling is switched to fast fill and the liquid oxygen tank in the CBCs is chilled prior to filling. T-3 hours 35 minutes. The LOX starts slowly filling the CBC's tank. T-3 hours 30 minutes. LOX filling is switched to fast fill. T-3 hours 20 minutes. C-band beacons are checked and the GPS is verified. T-3 hours 10 minutes. The guidance system is activated and the second stage hydrogen tank is chilled in preparation for fueling. T-2 hours 55 minutes. The LH2 in the CBCs has reached flight level. The tank is now continuously being topped off to replace the boiled off hydrogen. At the same time, the fill and drain valves are checked. T-2 hours and 50 minutes. LH2 starts flowing into the second stage. T-2 hours 40 minutes. The LOX in the CBCs has reached flight level. The fueling is now switched to topping off. T-2 hours 30 minutes. The LOX tank in the second stage is chilled in preparation for fueling. Another weather briefing takes place. T-2 hours 20 minutes. LOX starts flowing into the second stage. T-1 hour 45 minutes. The hydrogen in the second stage has reached flight level and is continuously topped off. T-1 hour 20 minutes. The oxygen in the second stage has reached flight level and is now continuously being topped off. T-1 hour 10 minutes. The telemetry links and flight termination systems are checked. T-55 minutes. The command receiver decoder is tested. T-50 minutes. The RS-68 swivel test to check the thrust factor control and the RS-68 spin start system is pressurized. This spins up the turbopumps prior to ignition. T-45 minutes. Flight termination checks are complete. T-15 minutes. Another weather briefing takes place. T-8 minutes. The launch pad ordnance is armed. T-minus 4 minutes. The built-in hold. T-minus 4 minutes and holding. The spacecraft is moved to internal power, final go-no-go polls take place, and the lock pins in the swing arms are retracted in preparation for rapid retract. T-minus 4 minutes and counting. Release hold, arming of the safe and arm switches. Delta 4 is moved to internal power. Second stage lock securing is started. The topping off sequence is stopped and propellant levels are verified at flight level and vent valves are closed to allow the tanks to come up to flight pressure. T-minus 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Transfer to internal power is complete. CBC locks and LH2 securing sequence start. T-minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds. The second stage locks is secured at flight level. T-minus 3 minutes and 15 seconds. CBC locks and LH2 are secured at flight level. T-minus 3 minutes and 7 seconds. The CBC starts being brought up to flight pressure, supplemented by helium in the high pressure storage bottles inside the tanks. T-minus 2 minutes, 35 seconds. The CBC locks is secured at flight level and flight pressure. Vehicle ordnance is armed. T-minus 2 minutes. The vehicle hydraulics are at flight pressure and the computer launch script starts running and takes control of the launch vehicle. T-minus 1 minute and 50 seconds. CBC LH2 is secured at flight level and flight pressure. T-minus 1 minute and 20 seconds. The second stage LH2 securing starts. T-minus 1 minute. Range verification. T-minus 50 seconds. The second stage LH2 is secured at flight level and flight pressure. T-minus 45 seconds. Launch enable is enabled and ground power is cut. T-minus 30 seconds. Final status check. The iconic Go Delta. T-minus 25 seconds. Green board. Verifying all systems are go. T-minus 15 seconds. Rofi ignition.
Rofi ignition.
T-minus 10, 9.
T-minus 9 seconds. The LH2 valve to the starboard booster engine is opened. This sometimes is visible as a flame at the bottom of the vehicle. The starboard booster is ignited 2 seconds earlier to reduce the hydrogen flare-up and suck the hydrogen escaping from the other boosters back into the flame trench.
8. We should have ignition.
T-minus 7 seconds. The LOX valve to the starboard booster engine is opened and the engine is ignited. The LH2 valves to the engines on the core and port booster are opened, allowing LH2 to flow into the engines.
6, 5.
T-minus 5 seconds. The LOX valves on the engines on the core and port booster are opened. The engines are ignited.
4, 3, 2.
T-minus 2 seconds. The engines have reached full throttle.
1, and...
T-minus 0.04 seconds. The launch computer has checked out the engines and confirms they are a go for launch. If everything is good, the computer commits to launch. T-minus 0 seconds. Launch. The swing arms swing back and the launch pad releases the rocket.
Liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy rocket with NROL 71 for the National Reconnaissance Office.
Vehicles beginning the pitch over maneuver.
You are hearing the voice of Patrick Moore providing launch vehicle ascent data.
Now 20 seconds into flight, seeing good chamber pressure across all three R68A engines. Now 30 seconds into flight. And core boosters beginning to throttle down to the partial thrust mode as expected. Core boosters reach partial thrust.
T plus 43 seconds. The core starts throttling down to 54.6%.
This allows the core stage to save fuel and burn for longer while reducing stress on the rocket.
Now 46 seconds into flight. Chamber pressures continue.
T plus 49 seconds. The core engine has reached 54.6% throttle.
Continuing to look good across all three R68 engines. Core booster in partial thrust mode. Port and starboard boosters in the full thrust mode. Now coming up on 1 minute into flight. Now passing 1 minute, 10 seconds. All three RS-68A engines continue to look good.
T plus 1 minute and 21 seconds. The rocket reaches maximum dynamic pressure. The vehicle experiences the most stress.
Vehicle's now passing max Q, maximum dynamic pressure.
T plus 1 minute 25 seconds. The rocket breaks the speed of sound at an altitude of 11 kilometers. Max Q for the medium plus was quite a bit earlier, somewhere between 45 and 70 seconds, because of the higher acceleration from the GEM 60s.
And vehicle is now past Mach 1. Delta 4 is now supersonic.
The SRMs on the medium plus burned out at 1 minute 31 seconds. The first pair was ejected at 1 minute 40 seconds, and if there were 4, the second pair was ejected at 1 minute 42 seconds.
And we have burnout on all 4 SRMs, standing by for jettison. And we have good indication of jettison of all 4 solid rocket motors. Now 1 minute 30 seconds into flight. Chamber pressures on all 3 RS-68A engines continue to look good. Core booster in the partial thrust mode, port and starboard boosters in the full thrust mode. 1 minute 40 seconds in. Launch vehicle is now 12 miles in altitude, traveling at almost 1,600 miles per hour. Chamber pressures on all 3 engines continue to look good, coming up on 2 minutes into flight. Second stage attitude control system press valve has been opened. System now pressurizing to flight levels. Response looks good. Now 2 minutes, 10 seconds in. Chamber pressures on all 3 engines continue to look good. Vehicle's now gone to closed loop guidance. Vehicle body rates look good. Now 2 minutes, 30 seconds in. Just over 3 minutes now remaining in the boost phase of flight. Engine operating parameters continue to look good. Now passing 2 minutes, 42 seconds in. The Delta IV rocket now weighs just 1/2 of what it did at launch, burning propellant at a rate of almost 5,000 pounds per second. 2 minutes, 55 seconds in. Vehicle body rates continue to look good. Now at 3 minutes, vehicle is now passing Mach 5. About 20 seconds remaining, and I'm sorry, 30, correction. Vehicle body rates continue to look good. Chamber pressures on the RS-68A engines continue to look good. Now coming up on 3 minutes, 20 seconds into flight. Just over 30 seconds now remaining until strap-on booster engine cutoff. 3 minutes, 30 seconds in, just over 2 minutes remaining in the boost phase of flight. Vehicle is now passing Mach 10. Chamber pressures on the RS-68A engines continue to look good.
T plus 3 minutes 55 seconds. The boosters start throttling down in preparation for booster separation.
And port and starboard booster engines now throttling down to partial thrust in preparation for cutoff as expected.
T plus 4 minutes. The boosters have reached 54.6% throttle. T plus 4 minutes and 2 seconds. The boosters have depleted their fuel and shut down.
And we have cutoff of the strap-on engines, standing by for separation.
T plus 4 minutes and 5 seconds. The boosters are jettisoned.
And we have good indication of separation of the port and starboard strap-on boosters.
T plus 4 minutes and 6 seconds. The core stage starts throttling back up.
Core booster is now throttled back up to the full thrust mode. Engine response looks good. 4 minutes, 10 seconds into flight. Chamber pressure on the core booster in the full thrust mode looks good. Upper stage lock system has begun boost phase chill down sequence to begin thermal conditioning of the upper stage engine. Now 1 minute remaining in the boost phase of flight. And upper stage fuel system has begun boost phase chill down. Core booster continues to coming up on 5 minutes into flight, a little over 30 seconds now remaining until BECO. Vehicle body rates continue to look good. Chamber pressure continue to look good on the core booster. Now 5 minutes, 20 seconds. Stand by for core booster throttle down shortly. Core booster is now throttling down as expected. Standing by for BECO.
T plus 5 minutes and 28 seconds. The core stage has depleted its propellant and shuts down.
And we have BECO booster engine cutoff, standing by for stage separation.
T plus 5 minutes and 34 seconds. The core stage separates.
And we have good indication of stage separation. Nozzle extension is now deploying. We have pre-start on the RL-10, standing by for ignition on the RL-10.
T plus 5 minutes and 47 seconds. The second stage ignites for the first time.
We have ignition and full thrust on the RL-10. Chamber pressure looks good. Body rates look good.
T plus 6 minutes, 6 seconds.
The fairing is jettisoned.
Standing by for payload fairing jettison. And we have good indication of payload fairing jettison.
Now it depends on where you are going. If you are going to low Earth orbit, the following happens. T plus 17 minutes, 55 seconds. The second stage shuts down for the first time. T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes and 20 seconds. The second stage ignites for the second time. T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes and 39 seconds. The second stage shuts down for the second time. Shortly afterwards, your payload is released. Now, if you are going to GTO, the following happens. T plus 16 minutes and 8 seconds. The second stage shuts down for the first time. T plus 23 minutes and 26 seconds. The second stage ignites for the second time. T plus 27 minutes and 45 seconds. The second stage shuts down for the second time. Shortly afterwards, your payload is released. Now, some missions are directly injected into geostationary orbit, or an orbit that is closer to that. If that's the case, there's a multi-hour coast phase between the GTO injection burn and the final burn. Depending on the height of the farthest point of the orbit, this coast phase can last somewhere between 3 and 6 hours. This shortens the time the satellite needs before it's operational. After the payloads are released, the second stage is deorbited for low Earth orbit missions. Sometimes it's possible to bring the second stage back to Earth on a GTO mission. If it's not, it's left into an orbit with a very low point that is very close to the atmosphere, so it burns up relatively quickly. For missions with direct injection or higher performance GTO orbits, the disposal of the second stage is not possible. They are put in graveyard orbits and drained of all fuel and electric charge to prevent them from breaking up. Thank you for watching another episode of Rocket Talk. Next time I'll be taking on the Atlas V. If you like this, please like and do not forget to share this video. Subscribe if you want more space related content. I regularly host rocket launches, so come and ask questions so you can learn about rockets and spaceflight. Ad Astra, and see you in the next episode of Rocket Talk.